So what do you do when it seems hopeless? The person you love doesn't seem to love you anymore. As a matter of fact, he or she may even say that. I don't love you. I don't want to be with you. I want out of here. Oh, they may give any number of reasons. Maybe it's because they feel you've been controlling. Maybe it's because you stand between them and some lifestyle they wish to live. Maybe, just maybe, they've gotten involved with somebody else. There could be all kinds of reasons for that, but they want to go. And it feels as if your life is over. Now, for some, it's like, oh, I'm glad you're gone. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more. But so many of us, because of the fact that we love so dearly, it just tears us apart, and life seems hopeless. Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Beam. Welcome to Marriage Radio. Last podcast, my special guest, David Mathews, who is the head of Spark of Life, and I talked about, is it truly hopeless? And David gave some great understanding of how you start the process of dealing with hopelessness when there's a sense of loss. We talked about loss in marriage, of course, but we talked about other losses as well because there are so many. And I had asked David in that podcast if he would come back in this podcast and give us some specifics. Welcome back, David. Glad you're on the program.
Thank you, Joe.
If you want to know more about David and his beautiful wife, Debbie, and the ministry they lead, you go to Spark of Life, sparkoflife.org, O-R-G, and you can find out about them then and there, and we will talk more about that a little bit later in this podcast. But right now, David, can you summarize in a minute or two what we said on the first podcast about what you first do when you feel hopeless because the person you love is leaving?
Well, the very first thing that is helpful is to admit you feel hopeless. And we said to give ourselves permission to grieve, that marriage problems such as you just described are major loss. Mm-hmm. Those are major losses. And so the person is really in a state of grief. Mm-hmm. And to admit that, to see it, helps me not think there's something wrong with me, that it was all my fault, or maybe I'm weak. And I'm a total failure. No, I'm in grief and I feel hopeless. And to admit that is really, if you want to talk about steps, and I don't like really steps, but
I understand, but at least part of the process.
Yeah, part of the process has to begin with an understanding that I'm honest with my feelings, and I do feel hopeless, and that's okay to feel that way, but that doesn't mean you are indeed hopeless.
Okay. And it's also okay to feel anger.
Anger at your spouse and how they've hurt you. Anger at God, if you're a God person, and why, God, I prayed for a Christian mate, or I prayed for my marriage, and I did everything I thought I could do. Anger at other people that might be involved in this. Maybe if there is another person, another woman, another person in your spouse's life. And so to be honest with that anger that you feel.
And anger toward yourself?
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail. How do I deal with all that?
Okay. So we talked about the fact that it's okay to feel all those things. As a matter of fact, if you really want to have any kind of healing toward hope for the future, it's really something that sooner or later, and hopefully sooner than later, you go through. We also talked about, and if you wish, you can go back and listen to that podcast about, okay, well, what about God's role in this? I'm angry with him. And David did an eloquent job explaining how that works and how you can deal with that. So we're not going to redo in this podcast all the things we did in that one. But if you haven't listened to that one, you may wish to go back and listen to it before you go into this one, because now, based on what David said in the previous podcast, we're going to move forward with specifics. So, David, the illustration I gave in the last podcast, and let me just give that again briefly here. A woman who had been dating her husband when she was in high school. They met when they were 16. They were high school sweethearts. They married, and they were together 30 years before he walked out that door. And she was saying things like, I feel hopeless. I don't know that I can live without him. I mean, he's been such a crucial part of my life all these years. What do I do? How do I cope? I'm lost. And that's where we started. So based on what you've said so far, what's next, my friend?
Well, I think it's called completing the incompletes. If I have incompletes in my life, okay, and we define them as regrets and resentments, and if they're not dealt with, if I don't do all I can do.
Okay, I want to make sure I understood.
Okay.
I think I heard understood on the last program. Regrets or the way I feel about things that I did or didn't do.
Right.
Resentments are how I feel about what you did or didn't do.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So my regrets is what did I do or didn't do? What do I wish I'd done different, better, or more that really hurt the relationship? What did I do? And the other is what did they do? And oftentimes it's imbalanced. He did everything wrong. I did nothing wrong. Or I've done everything wrong. He did nothing wrong.
Could that balance change by day? I mean,
yes,
like today,
by hour.
Yeah, okay. So this hour, he's the scumbag.
Right.
And the next hour is, oh, my goodness, it's all my fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and you've been through this.
Yeah, I have. Yes, I have.
I mean, with a lot of other people, as I have.
Well, and my own life as well.
Yeah. So that, so
how does that complete the incomplete? That's where.
Well, to complete the incompletes, I have to recognize, I have to be honest with my regrets and my resentments.
What does that mean?
That means actually state them, actually write them down. At our retreats, if somebody really needs help, I would recommend coming to a retreat because and I know everybody can't do that.
Right. I'm just going to give a little tantalizing information about this retreat. We'll mention it more in detail later, but these retreats are free.
Right.
They are free. Even the housing and the food is free.
Everybody has their own room, their own bathroom, great food.
And you do this in places that are awesome.
Awesome places.
I just went to one out
in Montana.
In Montana, and it was like amazing out there. So we'll tell you more about that later. All right, but do you have them write them down? What?
Well, to recognize that they have them, and because often we'll stuff some things either that the other person did or that I did or both. We'll stuff because they're too painful to deal with. So I have to have an avenue in which to express them and to recognize what they are, and then to do something about it. So regrets, I wish I'd been better in bed. I wish I'd have done things differently. I wish I'd have talked more. I wish I had
been more supportive, been there for me more often, et cetera,
right.
et cetera. We hear all those things.
Yeah. And of course, resentments are those things they did that hurt the relationship, So resentments I have to forgive, and regrets I have to apologize for. And the apology, if somebody's died, the person is not going to come back and say, "Oh, I forgive you, Dave," right? If they've died,
right?
So I can't depend on the other person saying it's okay for me to be set free from that. I can only do what I can do. So if I have regrets, I need to apologize, and if I have resentments, I need to forgive.
Okay, now does this apology have to be in person? I realize it can't be if they're dead, but is it always wise to do it in person?
No.
Okay.
Now, in a marriage, for reconciliation, obviously you're going to have to do that in person. Mm-hmm. Okay, if there's no hope in the marriage, I mean, if the other person, for example, doesn't want to work on it,
doesn't want to hear from you, talk to you, anything else,
so we have people write letters. And the letters have to do with resentments and regrets, and then also has to do with the good memories. So we want the good stuff, but we also have to be honest with our regrets and resentments.
And the reason you get them to think about the good stuff is?
Because, number one, it's a true look at it, because there's usually good things that are there. And that's that's reality. That's being honest. There were good things. And often when we get hurt by somebody, we forget that there has been some good things. It helps us actually have more hope. I mean, hope that I can recover from this, that I can still live a rich and fulfilled life, even if the other person doesn't come back, even if my spouse never comes back. But if I have a balanced view, I'm actually setting up a situation that, if they do come back, if they do want to work on the marriage, they might want to work on it a little bit more if I'm more balanced like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm thinking, but if you're dealing with a woman whose dad sexually abused her all of her childhood, is she going to have any good memories?
Even she could, but that's a different situation. We would not have that woman, and we handle this in our every retreat this comes up. They do not get to apologize to an abuser. Good. There is no apology to the abuser. Good. Because so many people think it's their fault. If they had have only done something different, better, or more, I wouldn't have been abused, and therefore I'm just a slut, or I'm no good. I'm a pile of you know what.
Yeah, and you're not going to let them do that in an exercise.
No, they will not apologize. We forbid them to apologize.
Good for you.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing about the regrets and the resentments is all relationships are in the context of other relationships.
Okay, what does that mean, David?
That means if I'm having struggles with Debbie, and we have had struggles, my wife, 43 years, that relationship struggle is not in isolation. You know, other relationships that I've had in my past actually influence how I deal with the relationship problem in the present. And so we say the same thing in our loss work. All losses are in the context of other losses. So here is a woman whose husband has left her. Okay, so her loss is deep and it's real and it's a major loss, right? Mm-hmm. But what we have our people do is we call it a loss story. They have to go back and do a loss story of their whole life. And they actually have to plot all their losses on a timeline sort of exercise that they do. And that means they have to just write down all their losses that they can think of from the time they can remember until the present time. We teach them how to do that. Mm-hmm. And when they do that, what often happens is a loss back in the past actually clarifies maybe what's happened with the present loss of their marriage relationship. It helps them see maybe how they responded in a way that was not helpful. It helps them, also empowers them to say, look what I've come through in my life, and I'm still here. And so I still have hope. And the response we get in our retreats when people have the exercise of the loss story, they come back the next day and they say, wow, it took me 3 pages to write all my losses, because we define loss as more than just death loss. You know, loss, marriage problems are huge losses. And so are lots of other things. Having a handicapped child is a huge loss, and you know that firsthand. Losing a job, losing a career, you lost a lot in your life, as I have too. And all those things are major losses. And so when I look at my loss story, so many different things I can learn from that. But one of the biggest things is if there's an incomplete in the past, and let's say, let's take a woman who was sexually abused by a stepfather, for example, and now she has a marriage problem, and she's never let go of that abuse back in the past. Maybe she's never spoken of it.
Right.
And this happens often, as you and I know.
I'd see it all the time.
All the time. Then she has what we'd call an incomplete there. It's not complete. It's still boiling inside of her. Now, she might have stuffed it for years and years and years. It might have affected her relationship with her husband. It doesn't give her husband the right to treat her unkindly or with disrespect, right? But it could certainly influence that relationship. If I'm incomplete with something in the past, I tend to recreate it in the future and in my present. I recreate it. We do work with attachment styles. We don't want to go into that, I guess, but it does relate here.
Right.
You know, how if I was abandoned as a child, for example, my wife is adopted and she has a lot of abandonment issues. And we talk about this in the workshop when we do the workshop. It affects her and me in the present if that's all still garbled up in the past and it's not complete. So in her work, she had to forgive her birth mother. Okay. She had to do what she could do. And we have a saying, it was actually written by, it's a book, All You Can Do Is All You Can Do, and All You Can Do Is Enough. And it's a book by A.L. Williams, who was an insurance guru back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, that company's still out there somewhere.
Is it still out there? Well, it's a fabulous book, and I'm not selling the book. we've just used the title of the book. All I Can Do Is All I Can Do. So you take a woman who might be having marriage problems and she has an abuse situation in the past that is unresolved. Then she needs to resolve it as what she can do. And what you can do is say, I forgive. And that doesn't mean have a relationship with somebody who hurt you.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that.
No, I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay.
No.
But what it does mean is I'm not going to let that control me any longer. I let go of that. And so I actually write, I forgive you for this. I don't like what you did. It was wrong. It's all your fault. And they actually write that down, but I forgive you. And I don't feel good about it, right? Forgiveness is a decision. It's not an emotion.
Not an emotion.
And so, but that's an example of something in the past that affects the present marriage relationship. So I have to complete it.
Okay, so the lady in our original story dated him since 16, high school sweethearts, married 30 years. He walks out of my life. Then when you say, we've already said to her, okay, first you've got to admit to yourself what you feel. It's okay to hurt and to accept that and embrace that, I guess, in a sense. Then you're saying to her, okay, but as part of the healing process, you need to kind of go back to your life and look at your other hurts.
Yes, and pain.
And what if she says, I've had no other hurts?
Well, if we're in a counseling situation, we would diffuse that quite quickly because all she has to do is start talking about her life, right? Her dad might have left her when she was 5, right? Or just name 100 different things could have happened in her life. And we see this in all the workshops that we do often.
Yeah, so if you can get them to look at it. I actually did, David, on one occasion working with a guy. He could not remember a single story, good or bad, from his childhood.
Wow.
I said, did you go to church with the parents? He said, yes. I said, can you remember any time? He said, I can't remember one. He had so blocked out his past.
Right.
Now, he was also into a lifestyle of doing one hurtful thing after another, which appeared to me to be his seeking validation. But he had so blocked off his childhood. And what I'm hearing you say is, until you finally open yourself up to it,
right,
and say, okay, I need to do this, what do you call it, a lost
story.
Until you do that, if you close all these other things off and say the past is the past, then you're probably not going to heal and have hope for the future. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah. Incompletes with the past can mess up the present and the future.
Okay.
So I've got to let go of it. And of course, somebody listening to this podcast, it's very difficult to do this on their own.
Yeah.
They need help. If you need help with this, talk to somebody about it. But
let me just suggest there, if you decide to go see a counselor or a therapist about this, they're not all created equal. And this is not to put down counselors or therapists. Right. But I always recommend, if you're going to go see a counselor or therapist, ask for a 5 to 10 minute phone visit first at no charge. And if they're legit, they're going to do that. And you ask them, what is your experience with this? What training do you have? How do you approach these kinds of things? And if they seem to dodge your questions and not give solid answers, find another therapist or counselor.
Exactly.
Plus, if you wish, you can call us at Marriage Helper. I'll give you that number. It's 615-472-1161. That's 615-472-1161. And we have marriage coaches. Now, if you were to call for this, I think you should ask specifically for David. David's one of our marriage coaches. David, of course, runs his own ministry, Spark of Life, but he carves out time to help couples with marriage problems and situations as well. But if you don't have a good counselor or therapist to help you with this, you can call our office, 615-472-1161. But I would specifically say, I want to deal with loss, and so please line me up with David. I'm not saying our other coaches aren't good. I'm saying that this is where David is a superstar, if you will. And if you think that you could possibly work it out, how long is your workshop or your retreat?
The retreats start on Thursday night, end on Sunday. And we've only got one more this year, and it's full. But we start again next year. That's why you might, if you're really in crisis now, obviously get some help.
Right.
But the biggest thing to me is there's always hope. There's always hope is one of our themes at Spark. And it's really a theme, too, for Marriage Helper. There is hope. Any marriage can be lost, but any marriage can be saved if both will stop doing the things that...
I was talking to Dave Ramsey once over at Financial Peace, and Dave said, actually, what we're selling people is hope. Yeah. And I said, well, us too.
Exactly.
If you'll pardon the use of the word selling. But us too, and you as well. A psych hospital, I used to be a consultant for a chain of psychiatric hospitals. And one of those hospitals had it on their cups that they would give away and stuff. It's never too late to have a happy childhood, which is another way of saying the same thing. If you want to know more about David's retreats, sparkoflife.org, O-R-G, sparkoflife.org. Okay, David, so if they complete the incomplete, or do you want to say something else about your retreats first?
Yeah, well, no, on the incompletes, the resentments that I have, I need to enumerate them. I need to be honest. If you're listening out there and you're having a marriage problem, and you might have also lost somebody that you love deeply, which might be affecting your marriage. I mean, it might not be the only effect, obviously, but it does play a part, especially if things are incomplete. So I have to wrap those things up. I was telling about A.L. Williams, all you can do is all you can do. If I hurt you, and I might have hurt you in the past, I haven't tried to, but I could still hurt you without meaning to, all I can do is apologize to you. That's all I can do. It's up to you to forgive me or not. I want you to forgive me. I would love for you to forgive me. Please forgive me, Joe. I would love for you to forgive me. But all I can do is apologize.
Yeah, you're not going to let me control you by refusing to forgive you.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You're going to be free of me.
Yes.
Even if I don't do the right thing.
Right. Exactly. And so I apologize to you is all I can do. And stop doing those things that hurt you. Obviously, I need to stop doing those things.
Right.
If I have resentments, all I can do is forgive you. You might not be sorry for what you've done. And that man that left his wife that we're talking about, he might not have any sorrow for that, what he's done.
Just today, a woman was saying, he said that his lover is pulling away from him, so he's going to go find another lover because he doesn't want anything to do with me. And then he just lambasted her. So no sorrow at all for the pain he brought her. I'm just going to find another woman because you're useless. Wow. Yeah, people can do some pretty mean things.
Yeah.
Mean.
So what can you do with that? I mean, if you're the recipient of that bitterness and hate, all I can do is I can forgive, but of course we need a lot of teaching about what forgiveness is.
Right.
It's not an emotion. It is a decision to let go.
If ever you who are listening decide to come to one of our workshops for marriages in crisis, it's just the Marriage Helper Workshop. Again, that same number I gave earlier, 615-472-1161. I have too many telephone numbers, David. I had to stop to think which one is it. 615-472-1161, or just go to Marriage Helper, marriagehelper.com. We do an intensive 3-day workshop for marriages in crisis. Every couple in there is going to be in an intense marriage situation. And what David now is saying is on the last day, we explain in detail what forgiveness means, and that it's not an emotion. It's a decision that will actually help your emotions over time. But that decision is a decision that will set you free.
It helps you.
Right.
And so when you do all you can do, and there's nothing more to do, that is completing those incompletes. And so many of us have incompletes in the past. And when my mom died, I didn't think I needed to write her a letter and all that, but I had deep resentments that I didn't want to admit. When I finally admitted it, and I didn't feel like a bad son because I admitted I had some resentments toward my mom, I wrote her a letter and said, Mom, I forgive you. I forgive you for this, that, and the other. And then I said, and I apologize to you for yelling at you the day before you died. And I did. I yelled at my sweet mom the day before she died. Well, I have regrets about that. Yeah. So when you talk about a marriage situation, there has to be, to deal with that loss, I have to complete the incompletes. And I need help doing it. And I want to say this. The other thing that really helps give people hope, in my opinion, is seeing others who have been through similar things. Yeah. And they haven't quit. And that's what Joe and Alice Beam do for people. What you do for people is give them hope, right? And in the marriage workshops, when you're around other couples, we all tell stories of real life couples that have been through you know what and back. Yep. And they are making it now. That gives people hope. Right. First time I ever went skiing in Winter Park, Colorado. My friend.
Isn't that where they did The Shining? I think they actually filmed The Shining there.
No, I don't know that.
Okay.
But it might be true. So anyway, my friend took me up to the top of the mountain.
Estes Park. I'm sorry.
It's Estes Park.
I'm old. It just hit my brain. Estes Park. Okay, so you're skiing.
I'm skiing, and I kept falling down. My friend said that I didn't need to go to ski school, that I could master this. Well, the first day I threw up on the mountain. I fell down. I had to be taken by one of those, what do they call them? The snowmobiles down to the base of the mountain. And I was wasting thousands of dollars, right? And the next day I said, I'll give it one more shot. I went up to the top. I kept falling down. A one-legged skier skied past me. A blind person skied past me. A grandmother skied past me. Listen, a 5-year-old skied past me. And then a grandmother, one-legged blind grandmother skied past me, right?
No, you're making this up.
I'm making the last part up.
Okay, all right.
Well, what happened to me in the snow, I said, if they can do it, I can do it. And it really was the turnaround for me. You know, if I believe I can never have hope again, I won't have hope. But I need somebody to help me see that there's always, always hope, even in the midst of life feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's powerful to be around other people in an environment in which they've lived through it and they can give you hope.
David, would it be a kind of a counterpoint to that then? Maybe you need to avoid people who've been through it and they became bitter?
That's a great point. Sometimes support groups can become very toxic. I've seen it. I was doing a divorce recovery group many years ago in Michigan, and it lasted for 3 years. And we probably sent 150 people came through that divorce recovery group over time. We had about 5 or 6 that stayed the whole time. And they ended up, and I did a very poor job of this group.
We all learned,
yeah,
don't we?
We learned. It became toxic because they were around people who were still stuck in bitterness and pain. And I canceled the group. I said, next week we're going to all have dinner at our house. And they almost lynched me, Joe, because they did that group, but it had become toxic.
They almost lynched you because they didn't have a place to spew their toxicity?
Yes, exactly. And I told them it's not good for you anymore.
And so the point I think we're making here is that if you're struggling, you know, your pain, you're hurt because of the fact that your husband or your wife walked out, there are some people who will make it worse.
Yes, they could.
And
yes.
Please avoid those people. Don't let them worm their way into your life. They'll lead you to bitterness, or they'll lead you to a lifestyle where that you try to cover your pain through alcohol or drugs or sex or something like that. So find people who've really gone through it and matured, I guess is a word we use, right?
Right, matured. And that's what's so powerful in our retreats. You know, it's the people who have helped us in our retreats. One couple lost a daughter whose husband murdered her. They're dear friends of ours. Another couple lost a son who a drug overdose. And then other couples have. We had a couple that's starting to help us now. They've lost 3 children. They lost twins in an accident. They were 18 years of age, and then a few years later, their 3rd child took his own life because of losing. And this couple, they almost lost their marriage because of all these horrific losses. But then they stuck with it. They got some help.
So getting help and being around people who have weathered the storm, if you will.
Weathered the storm, and that can give you some insight and some encouragement.
Okay. So what else, David? What other specifics can they do?
Well, we mentioned it. We mentioned it at the end of last week's podcast. We heard a statement by somebody on grief. I've read so much about grief. This one author said that sometimes we become so consumed with what we've lost, we lose sight of what we have. And that is so very true. And I think all of us go through that sometimes. Look at what we've lost. And it's called the pit of grief. But to get out of that pit of grief, it really helps me to start thinking of what I do have. And bitterness can come in. And when bitterness comes in, it can just control my life. So I've got to be thinking about what I do have. And so we do the gratitude journal. I think I mentioned this at the last podcast. In fact, our son told us about this, who's a therapist, and he has his clients keep a gratitude journal. And every week...
This is your PhD son.
Yes.
Very bright young man. Yeah. Very bright.
And he really gave us this idea without trying to. He's just telling us what the power of gratitude. But working with people, some who are clinically depressed and others who are depressed but maybe not clinically, he has them write one thing a day in their gratitude journal that they're thankful for, that they have. And when they come into the therapy session the next week, he says, I can tell within a minute whether they've done their work or not in their gratitude journal. So he'll say, so how's the gratitude journal going? And they'll say, well, I didn't really get to it this week. And he can tell by their face.
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating. So gratitude, we don't start with gratitude. If you came to me and your wife had left you, like this woman's husband left her, I wouldn't tell her, well, you need to be thankful for your kids. I would tell her, grieve. You're not crazy. You've experienced a horrendous loss, and it's okay for you to grieve. And I hate that you have to go through this, and it's going to hurt. But you're not crazy. You're grieving. Okay? And then as we work together, we'd eventually get to gratitude. So at our retreats, we don't get to gratitude on Thursday night when they tell their story. We don't say things like, well, at least you have other kids, or at least you were married. You know, some people have never gotten married, and their husbands have left them. We have many divorced people that come to our retreats. And I'm telling you, we don't start there. But by Sunday, we give them a Spark of Life gratitude journal, and they actually have to write down something they're thankful for on Sunday afternoon before they leave. And then they share it with the group, and you should see their faces. It gives them hope to get up and live again.
Because that's what we're actually trying to reach, right?
Right.
That there is hope.
There is hope.
Not necessarily that we're going to recover what we lost.
Right. In fact, one of the key components of grief recovery, and it's the same thing in what we're talking about this woman because she's in grief, is that life will never be the same again. It's hard to psychologically accept that because I want it to be the way it used to be.
Yeah.
But even examining that statement in a typical marriage, do you know, when you got back with Alice, did you want life the way it used to be?
Well, I thought I did.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't. And neither did she.
Yeah, right. So you have a new marriage. You had a new marriage. So actually that kind of attitude can help set the foundation for a possible reconciliation, but the other person has to want it, right? They have to decide to try. And sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
And so to accept the fact, whether they come back or not, life will never be the same again, but it can still be rich and fulfilling. In the pit of grief, we have the way out of the pit, and it's nobody can see my hand because this is.
Yeah, but I'm looking at it. Hey, you should see this illustration with his hand. It's amazing.
It's up and down, right? Up and down as you get out of the pit. And so, and we ask this question. We have on the left side of the chart their loss that put them into the pit. And as they climb out of the pit, we ask this question: can life over here on the right be higher than life was before the loss?
Oh, that's great. I like that.
And the answer is always yes. Some don't like that, okay? And they'll say, well, no, life can never be better. And then others will say, and this is the power of having other people around you that have been through it, they'll say, well, no, I'm a different person today. I'm not glad this happened. I'm not glad my spouse left me. No, I went through hell. I went through all of this, but I'm a different person. I'm a stronger person. I'm a better person. I've got to have that hope that though life will never be the same, life can still be rich and fulfilling.
That is so crucial, David. I've heard Alice, my wife, for those that don't know, many years ago, I left Alice for another woman. I divorced Alice, thought I'd marry the other woman and be happy ever after, which did not occur. Actually, it very seldom ever occurs. And even if you marry the other person, it's extremely rare that it's happy. But finally, after 3 years, I asked Alice if she would take me back, and she did. Even though she was already dating somebody else, we remarried. And so in some of our workshops, people will ask Alice questions like, why did you take him back, and et cetera, et cetera. And I've heard her say on many occasions, that was the most painful thing I've ever been through. But I'm so much better as a person today and more fulfilled and complete. Now, then sometimes people say, well, that's because Joe came back. What if he hadn't come back? It would still be the same answer.
It would be the same answer.
I'm a better person than I was before. I am more fulfilled. I know more about life. And I hate that I went through that pain. But her life is, and so is mine, and our children. All of our lives are better than it was before all of that idiocy happened.
Right. And you wouldn't do that in order to make it better. That's not what you're saying. Obviously, that's not.
No, hopefully there's not some crazy person out there going, well, dang.
There's probably one.
Yeah, I can make my life's a lot better. No.
But it's so true. Though life can never be the same. Life can still be rich and fulfilling. And
if he comes back to this woman we've been dealing with, or if he doesn't come back.
Exactly.
I married one celebrity couple. I'll leave them unnamed at this point, but as I was officiating at their wedding, each had been through a very publicized divorce, each of whom had fought valiantly trying to save their marriages. But it was not to be. And so later, I actually introduced them. And after that, later, they decided to marry, and so I officiated at their wedding. And one of the things I said, because I wanted all those people in that audience, including the other celebrities who were sitting in that audience to hear, was, I said, the reason that you are with each other today is because you both went through that.
Right.
And you stayed faithful to what you believed was right and true, even in the midst of your pain. And this is the blessing that you got from that. A couple of years after that wedding, she told me once, she said, I never knew what it was like to really be loved until now.
Wow.
Now, neither one of them wanted that divorce, and they would still be with their spouses if they could have worked it out. But you're right. You can still have a good life afterwards. Now, don't think that what we're saying is, oh, just go ahead and don't worry about this marriage. The next one will be better. That's not what we're trying to say. We fight for marriages, and we want to help you in any way we can to try to put your marriage back together and save it. But David's point is so valid. It's not going to be the same.
Right. And if you think about it, even if you have a good marriage, it's not going to be the same.
Right. For all those who are listening, that if you hear the sound of the background, those are the helicopters from Fort Campbell that when they do the exercises fly right over the top of my house. Okay, if you hear that noise, that's what it is.
I'm so glad you cleared that up. That was good.
Okay.
So,
what else, David?
What else? I think it gets back to purpose of living.
There you go.
What am I living for? Why do I get up in the morning? And when life throws us these curveballs, it's very hard to see that for a while, and that's called grief. So when we're in grief, we give ourselves permission. But deep down, we know what we just talked about, life can still be rich and fulfilling, and then find my purpose in living. And when we lost our grandson, and we've had other losses in our family as well that I don't want to get into, but my wife and I almost quit. I mean, it was like, why go on?
Almost quit what?
Quit caring.
About anything.
About anything. Almost giving me an excuse not to care. I was preaching at the time, and I didn't like God at the time, and I had to preach sometimes 4 sermons a Sunday. I didn't want to preach, right? I would have been better off taking a sabbatical, and if our church leaders had understood what we're talking about, and they didn't. It's no fault of their own.
They just didn't know.
They didn't know. I should have had some time to grieve, but I had to help other people.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't very good at it for a while, and so. But then as I did give myself permission to grieve, as we still got into this, life took on a new meaning, and that is to help those who have experienced loss, which includes marriage loss. And so that's why I love working with you guys, because it's so similar. It's giving hope to people who feel hopeless. There's always hope. And so when I give myself permission to grieve and go through the valley of the shadow of death, as it were, as Jesus did, he had an eternal hope. He had something to hope for and to live for. And so, and we teach this in your workshops, and you've taught it so many years. My life dreams and desires change over time, and they're shaped and influenced by our life experiences, both good and bad. And if it was only good that happened, number one, we'd be living in fantasy land.
Yeah.
And number two, it'd be very unhealthy.
Yeah.
It really would.
It would.
because we are refined by our experiences and by sometimes what other people do to us, by their own selfish desires. And so to find that meaning, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? In my coaching, we have a couple of couples right now that are doing very well, and I need to hear those good stories sometimes.
Yeah, I do too.
And they are doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, yesterday, one of the couples, and I'm trying to get him to write his testimony for you to use because it's incredible. He said, I want to do what Joe Beam's doing. I want to do what you're doing. We want to help other couples. And I said, well, then you will someday. You keep working on your marriage. Mm-hmm. Don't get too far up, ahead of yourself.
Right.
You're not ready to jump in and do a seminar. Right. But someday you will be used to help others because they have the desire to help others because of their experience. Mm-hmm. He has a very similar story to yours. And so the purpose in living, why do I get up in the morning? You can find that purpose. But if you're in the midst of grief right now, grieve. But don't grieve alone all the time. Find somebody to help you, whether it's me in coaching or whether it's coming to a retreat or whether it's a good friend or a pastor or some religious lady, somebody. And then realize that life can still be rich and fulfilling, and you'll find that purpose.
Even if it's not today.
Today, right.
And as you said in the previous podcast, I think worth repeating here, there is no specified time to do this. People heal in different ways at different times.
Yeah. And time does not heal all wounds. It's what we do at the time. It's what we do with it. Recovery from loss is achieved by a series of small and correct choices made by the one who is grieving. And as I have to take control of my own life, as far as if my marriage is falling apart, I can't fix my spouse, but I can work on me. In the same way, when we talk about recovery from any kind of loss, I need to empower myself. I'm in charge of my recovery, not Joe Beam, right? And not some guru who's written a book and says that it takes a year to get over the loss of a spouse through divorce, and it takes 2 years to get over the loss of a parent, and it takes 3 years to and you'll never get over the loss of a child. All those things are false. Get over is a bad term anyway.
It is.
It's getting through it.
Yes.
And anybody can recover from any loss. And I can, we've had people who've lost 6 children, people who've lost 5, people who've lost 3.
Wow.
We've had people who have lost 3 husbands to divorce. We've had people who've been abused. And I can tell you that they can recover. You can recover. And this woman we were talking about, and if you're one of those out there that are experiencing something similar to what Joe just said, we just want to repeat, there's always hope. Don't give up. Don't quit.
Now, there's a last question I want to ask, but I want to make sure that I'm not cutting you off from everything you wanted to say before. Okay. All right. So how do we put this together then, David, when the lady says, but your whole ministry is about trying to put marriages back together? You're telling me that that's not a guarantee, and of course we say that. No, we cannot guarantee you that. It may not. Our experience with the couples that come through our workshop is that 3 out of 4 actually do salvage their marriages, and we're very happy about that. But 3 out of 4 is not 4 out of 4.
That's right.
All right. So how do I maintain the desire to try to solve the problems and save the marriage while still grieving? In other words, how do I stay in contact with reality where I'm not living in some la-la land that God's going to make him come back?
Right.
How do you reconcile all that? How does that all balance out?
Well, for me, it's all I can do is all I can do. I cannot do what I cannot do. I cannot force anybody to love me.
That's correct.
I can't do it. So to accept that and to say, what can I do? And we teach this in the workshops, as you know, if you want to have a better shot at making the marriage work, you need to do this. But I don't think you need to do it in order to make the marriage work. You need to do it because it's the right thing to do. I need to take care of myself. I need to recover myself. I need to help, take care of me physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. I take care of me. I can't force you. And that's all I can do.
I agree.
All right.
But is it a bad thing that I hold within myself some hope?
Of course not. Of course not, because there is hope. But we can't tell if that other person is ever going to come back or not and try.
Exactly.
And there'll come a time, and I've dealt with people all my life like this, and so have you, that sometimes the person who has been left because of somebody else, right? Their spouse went off with somebody else. When the spouse wakes up someday from that limerence and comes back, the person that they left is doing so well they don't want them back.
Yeah, it's like that boat has now sailed.
It has sailed. And so who can say when that comes? That's the eternal question, I guess, in your work. There's no easy answers for that. But yes, hold on to hope, but realize that I hold on to hope by just being the person I need to be and working on myself. And it sounds so trite.
Yeah, it seems like, though, that the underlying theme, and if I've missed this, please feel free to correct me. It won't hurt my feelings one bit. From the last podcast on this one is that the underlying principle is all about acceptance. I accept what has happened has happened. I accept my part. I accept that he or she did what they did. I can't change it. I can't go back and change it. I accept the fact that I cannot change him or her. Therefore, I accept the fact that I can only change me. I can have hope that that will lead to the results I want, but if it doesn't, I can accept that too.
Right.
Is
that's
what
it.
I'm hearing?
That's exactly what you're hearing.
And then that's how I can have a rich and fulfilling life.
Right. Yes.
Now, it really makes me happy to see the number of marriages that actually do get past these severe, amazingly bad problems and work it out. That's the goal of what we do at Marriage Helper. We try to help people have good marriages, and when marriages are in crisis, try to help them salvage those marriages and make them good. And we rejoice every time we hear those stories. But for the ones that it didn't turn out that way, when they did everything that they could possibly do, accepting the fact that they're still human and they're not going to do it perfectly.
Right.
Nobody does it perfectly. That if they did the right things as best they can as human beings, like you said, you said a series of decisions or...
Yeah, small and correct choices.
There you go.
Do the next right thing, whatever it is. Do the next right thing and break it down to what do I need to do, the next right thing. And it might be as simple as getting out of bed before noon.
Yeah.
And that was actually what somebody told me. The next right thing I need to do is get up before noon.
I have actually been there. Yeah. It's been years, but I know how that feels. Yeah. And that person still can have a rich and meaningful life, even if the marriage doesn't work out, which we hope it does. That's why Marriage Helper is here. But it doesn't mean that your life is over.
That's right.
It can still be rich and fulfilling.
Right.
If you'd like to know more about David's retreats, did we talk about it enough in this workshop that they know what you do? Just a couple of minutes again.
Yeah, we do grief recovery retreats for those who've experienced loss of any kind. We don't qualify you to come or not. It's just if we have space, you can come. You can bring a friend. You can bring your spouse, 18 years of age and older.
And you do these things like in Montana and
Alaska, Colorado, California. We've been to 11 states. We have fabulous places. They're just so cool.
I've been to one. They are. And the lodging, and you provide the meals.
All
they have to do is get there.
Just get there. You have to provide your own transportation. And so these retreats have been very successful. About 1,100 people have come. 1,100. All the people who've taken our evaluation said, would you recommend this to others? It's 100% so far.
That's amazing. So, and you don't charge them a penny.
Not a penny.
If they want to give a donation later, you're a nonprofit.
Right.
We will take it.
We'll take it.
But they have to have their own transportation.
Yes.
And you have a tremendous 3-day retreat. Is that what you call them?
Yeah, we call them retreats because we honor you and serve you, and we don't even let you take your bag into the room. We take your bags for you. If you don't fight me on it, I've had some people try to fight me on that, and I say, no, I'm in charge. I'm taking your bag.
How about that?
Yeah, and we also offer, the way we pay for these retreats is through donations of churches, businesses. We have businesses who pay us to do retreats for their employees. It's been a big deal. And if you're interested in that, call us. Go to the website. We do grief workshops for churches. I'm doing one next week with our friend Clay.
Can you just give them your number?
Yes, 501-230-3007. That's Dave Mathews.
Say that one more time.
501-230-3007. 3007. I am not the band guy, but I am Dave Mathews. So,
or sparkoflife.org.
Sparkoflife.org. Our phone number's in there. It's my wife's phone number. She's the official phone number of Spark. But you can call me as well. And we do suicide prevention, suicide safer communities and schools. A man came to a retreat. He and his wife lost a son to suicide 8 years ago. And this last December, about a year ago, he came to a retreat and he cried and cried and cried. I thought he was doing well before the retreat. I'd met him one time, but he had stuffed everything. And he is passionate about helping prevent suicides. And we have a fabulous program for schools, for communities, and we're very excited about it. We do charge for these other things in order to pay for the retreats. The retreats, they're our heartbeat. The heartbeat of Spark are these retreats.
I understand.
But we want to reach more and more people. And everybody can't come to a retreat. And we can only do so many. So we want to reach other people in other ways. So our grief workshops at churches, the communities come. They're really fabulously successful. And I say that humbly because it's not me, but it's hitting a nerve of people. People are hurting out there.
Yes.
And again, it's not just death losses. It's the losses you deal with in these marriage workshops, and people have had their dreams shattered and they're hurting. So it's for those who have experienced loss of any kind. That's really important.
David and Debbie do a great job at that. They also lead our intensive 3-day workshops for marriages in crisis. They do a great job with those. And if you want to know more about that, you go to our website, Marriage Helper. That's marriagehelper.com. David, thank you so much for being on these podcasts and sharing such great information with these folks.
One more thing, Joe.
Please.
Over the years, when I was working for a church, we sent over 100 couples to your workshops. And over 90% of them that I know are still together. Miracle after miracle after miracle has happened.
Awesome.
And if you are in crisis, or even if you're not, if you think, I wish all of my kids would go to your workshop. I wish everybody I knew would go to these workshops.
All of my kids had to go to the workshop. Seriously.
Yeah, to be in the will, they've got to go to the workshops. Yeah,
but actually, as much as we owe, it's to get out of the will.
But I really mean this. I could tell stories all day long about what's happened, and this has been. I started sending people in the year 2000, and you started these workshops in 1999.
99, yeah.
And I could tell story after story, and I'm just telling you, it works. It works. And just want to give you hope there.
Great. Thank you again, David.
You're welcome.
So much appreciate it. This is Dr. Joe Beam with Marriage Radio, thanking you for listening.